My impulsive sister secretly used my mother's medical credit card for a luxury resort. I instantly cut off all financial support. Now she is begging in tears because the reservation was canceled and blames me entirely. I told her, "Emergency is for hospitals, not resorts." I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Megan Foster. I'm 36 years old and I live just outside Charlotte, North Carolina. I work as the office manager at a dental practice, and for the last 5 years I've been raising my 2 boys on my own after my divorce. If you asked my kids what I'm best at, they'd probably say making pancakes on Saturday mornings. If you asked my family, they'd tell you I was the one who fixed everything. The night everything finally caught up with me, I wasn't arguing with anyone. I wasn't checking bank statements. I wasn't even thinking about my sister. I was sitting beside a quiet lake with my sons, Owen and Caleb. The 3 of us had rented a tiny cabin tucked away in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It wasn't a luxury place. It had a small fire pit, an old wooden porch, and a view that made you forget your phone even existed. Honestly, that was exactly why I'd picked it. I had been saving for that little trip for almost a year. Not because it was expensive. Because every dollar in my budget already had somewhere else to go. Caleb was carefully holding a marshmallow over the fire. "I think this one's perfect." Owen looked over and laughed. "Dude, it's literally on fire." Caleb yanked the stick back. "It still counts." "No, it doesn't." "Mom?" They both looked at me, waiting for me to settle the debate. I smiled. "I think your brother just invented smoked marshmallows." The boys burst out laughing. That sound? It made every extra shift I'd worked feel worth it. Then my phone buzzed. I barely glanced at it. Lauren. I let it ring. A few seconds later, it buzzed again. Then again. Then my mom called. Then Lauren. Then my aunt. Then my cousin Ashley. I finally picked up my phone. 21 missed calls. By the time I unlocked the screen, it was 26. Text messages started piling up. "Call me immediately." "Where are you?" "This is an emergency." "Answer your phone." I stared at the screen for a few seconds. "Everything okay?" Owen asked. I looked at my boys. Caleb was trying to sandwich his marshmallow between 2 graham crackers before it slid off the stick. Nothing about this moment deserved to be interrupted. I turned my phone face down. It can wait. Neither of them questioned me. Kids know when adults are pretending everything is fine. They also know when you need one peaceful evening. About 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated again. I sighed and picked it up. 31 missed calls, 18 voicemails, more texts than I wanted to count. Whatever had happened back home, it clearly wasn't small. But for once, I wasn't willing to drop everything. I switched my phone to silent. Then I helped Caleb build another s'more. That decision probably sounds simple. For me, it wasn't. Because for years, I'd trained everyone around me, including myself, to believe I should always answer. Always solve the problem. Always find the money. Always figure something out. If someone forgot to pay a bill, they called me. If paperwork became confusing, they called me. If my mom needed help understanding insurance, they called me. If someone in the family made an expensive mistake, eventually they called me too. It became such a normal part of my life that my uncle joked about it every Thanksgiving. "As long as Megan's around," he'd laugh, "nothing can really go wrong." Everyone would laugh, including me. Back then, I thought they were complimenting me. Looking back, I think they were describing a role I'd quietly accepted without realizing it. The funny thing is, I never saw myself as the responsible one growing up. I was just the one who made lists, the one who remembered birthdays, the one who balanced a checkbook before spending money. Life after my divorce only made me more careful. Every paycheck had a purpose. I kept separate savings for emergencies, vacations, my boys' education, even Christmas shopping. Some people thought it was obsessive. I thought it was survival obsessive. I thought it was survival. Because when you're raising 2 kids alone, I'll figure it out later, isn't really a financial plan. Still, none of that explains why my entire family expected me to rescue them every single time. That expectation didn't start after my divorce. It started years earlier. It started with a promise I made to my father while he was lying in a hospital bed, asking me to take care of the one person he knew would need me after he was gone. My dad, Harold Foster, was never the kind of man who talked just to hear himself speak. If he had something important to say, you listened. A few days before he passed away from heart failure, he asked me to stay behind after Mom stepped out to grab coffee. Lauren was in the hallway talking to a nurse. Dad looked at me and said quietly, "I need you to promise me something." I reached for his hand. "You don't have to worry about us." A small smile crossed his face. "That's exactly why I'm asking you." He took a slow breath before continuing. "Your mother has never been comfortable handling money." That was true. Dad had always paid the bills, managed the insurance, handled the taxes, and kept every important document neatly organized. Mom avoided all of it. "I don't want her trying to figure it out alone," he said. "You won't have to," I answered. "I'll help her." He gently squeezed my hand. "Not just help. Manage it." Those words carried more weight than I realized at the time. Then he told me something else. "I want you to open an emergency credit card for your mother." I nodded. "But only for real emergencies. If she's hospitalized? If the furnace quits in the middle of winter? If something happens that can't wait?" He looked me straight in the eye. "Promise me it never becomes spending money." "I promise." He relaxed a little, then added one final request. "Don't give Lauren access." I hesitated. Not because I disagreed, because hearing a father say that about his own daughter hurt. Lauren wasn't cruel. She was impulsive. She'd buy first and figure out the budget later. A few months earlier, she'd financed furniture she couldn't really afford because it was too good of a deal. Dad wasn't judging her. He simply knew how she handled money. "I love your sister," he said. "But she spends emotionally. You think ahead. I need someone who'll protect your mother, even if she gets upset with you." I swallowed hard. "I'll do it." "I know you will." Dad passed away 2 days later. The weeks after his funeral were filled with paperwork, insurance forms, utility accounts, bank appointments. Every evening, Mom and I sat at her kitchen table sorting through documents Dad had always handled without anyone noticing. Slowly, we built a system. I organized her pension deposits, set up automatic bill payments, helped her understand her insurance, and just like Dad asked, I opened an emergency credit card in her name. Before handing it to her, I repeated his instructions. "This card stays in your wallet and hopefully you'll never need it." Mom nodded. "I understand." Lauren happened to be visiting that afternoon. She picked up the envelope and asked, "What's this?" "Just an emergency card," Mom replied. Lauren shrugged. "Must be nice having someone handle everything for you." She laughed as she said it, so I laughed too. It isn't exactly exciting. The conversation moved on, and I never gave it another thought. I didn't believe Dad chose me because I was better than Lauren. I accepted the responsibility because I couldn't stand the idea of Mom feeling lost after losing her husband of almost 40 years. For a while, everything worked. Mom called when she had questions. I'd stop by after work once or twice a month. We'd review bills, drink coffee, and she'd insist on sending me home with leftovers. It became our routine. I honestly believed I was simply honoring Dad's last request. What I didn't notice was how quietly that arrangement began to change. One favor turned into another, then another. Somewhere along the way, people stopped treating my help like a kindness and started acting like it was my job. Keeping my promise quickly became part of my routine. On the first weekend of every month, I'd sit at my dining room table with my laptop, a cup of coffee, and Mom's stack of bills spread out in front of me. Mortgage, electricity, water, health insurance, prescription refills. I'd double-check every payment before scheduling it. Once everything was finished, I'd transfer an extra $350 into Mom's checking account for groceries or anything unexpected. It wasn't because she demanded it. Most of the time, she'd call and say, "Honey, you don't have to send that much." And I'd laugh. "I know. Just let me worry about it." That became our rhythm. I'd stop by her house after work a couple of times each month. We'd drink coffee in the kitchen while I sorted paperwork, and she'd pack leftovers for me before I left. "You work too hard," she'd tell me. "So do you." Those afternoons actually made me happy. It felt less like a responsibility and more like spending time with my mom. Lauren was around too, just differently. She'd stop by for dinner, borrow Mom's blender because hers suddenly stopped working, or ask if anyone wanted to split takeout. When conversations turned to bills or appointments, she'd quietly disappear into another room. I never called her out for it. Everyone contributes differently, I told myself. One Sunday, Mom mentioned her insurance premium had gone up. Before I could answer, Lauren smiled across the table. "Good thing Megan always knows how to make money." Everyone laughed. I smiled too. It didn't seem worth making awkward. A few weeks later, my aunt needed help filling out some Medicare paperwork. "Ask Megan," Lauren said without even looking up from her phone. "She's good at all that boring financial stuff." Again, everyone laughed. I helped my aunt. Life moved on. Little moments like that happened more often than I realized. If someone couldn't understand a bank letter, Megan will know. If Mom needed new glasses, Megan can figure it out. If the family wanted to compare insurance plans, let's wait until Megan gets here. None of those requests bothered me by themselves. The strange part was how automatic they became. No one asked whether I had time. They simply assumed I would. At home, my own life stayed busy enough. Owen had baseball practice twice a week. Caleb somehow managed to outgrow shoes every few months. I worked full-time, packed lunches, helped with homework, and still tried to put a little money into savings every payday. Some nights I'd look at my budget spreadsheet and think maybe I should cut back on the extra money I sent Mom. Not because I couldn't afford it, because my boys were getting older, and their expenses were growing too. I'd even open my banking app and hover over the transfer amount. $350. Maybe I should make it $300, maybe $250. Then I'd picture Mom standing in the grocery store comparing prices or worrying about an unexpected prescription. I'd close the app without changing anything. "It'll be okay," I'd tell myself. "I'll figure it out." Looking back, those 4 words explained way too much about my life. I'll figure it out. Somehow, I always did, which meant no one else had to. One evening, our family group chat suddenly became unusually active. Lauren had sent half a dozen messages before I even finished work. "I have an idea for this year's family reunion." Every fall, our family rented a few simple cabins in the mountains. Nothing fancy. We cooked together, played cards, went fishing, and complained about whoever burned breakfast. It wasn't about the cabins. It was about spending time together. I smiled as I opened Lauren's messages, expecting pictures of another cozy place like always. Instead, the first photo showed a luxury mountain resort with fireplaces, spa packages, private balconies, and panoramic views. Her next message popped up almost immediately. "This year, we're doing something completely different." The photos Lauren shared looked like something out of a travel magazine. Stone fireplaces, floor-to-ceiling windows, private balconies overlooking the Smoky Mountains. An outdoor heated pool? One of the cabins we'd rented in previous years probably cost less than one night at this place. My phone kept buzzing as everyone reacted. This looks amazing. We deserve this. Best reunion ever. I opened the resort's website and quietly looked through the rates. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just a little upgrade. It was almost 3 times what we normally spent. I typed a message. Looks beautiful. Has everyone seen the price yet? Lauren replied almost immediately. Don't stress about it. We only live once. A few relatives reacted with laughing emojis. Nobody answered my actual question. A few days later, Mom invited everyone over for Sunday dinner. It wasn't unusual. She loved having the family together whenever she could. While everyone filled their plates, Lauren pulled out her phone. I already talked to the resort, she said excitedly. If we book soon, we'll get the best rooms. My cousin nodded. I'm in. So are we, my aunt added. Then everyone looked at me. Not because I was organizing the trip, because I'd always been the practical one. What do you think, Megan? Mom asked. I smiled politely. I think it's beautiful. Lauren grinned. See? Even Megan likes it. I didn't say that. The table got quiet for a second. I took a sip of iced tea before continuing. I'm just saying it's a lot more expensive than what we've always done. Lauren waved her hand. Come on. We spend every reunion cooking the same burgers and sitting around the same campfire. Maybe it's time we do something special. I shrugged. I've never thought the cabins were the important part. They're not, she replied. But making memories is. Nobody argued with her. Honestly, I didn't either. Everyone has different priorities. If the family wanted a nicer vacation and everyone could comfortably afford it, that wasn't my decision to make. I simply said, as long as everyone knows what they're signing up for. Lauren smiled. Oh, don't worry. We'll make it work. Something about the way she said it lingered in my mind. Not enough to start a fight. Just enough that I remembered it later. The conversation drifted to football, school schedules, and whose turn it was to host Thanksgiving. By the end of dinner, the resort had become the official plan. A week passed without anyone asking me for money. That alone felt unusual. Normally, once vacations were involved, somebody needed help booking a room or splitting a payment. This time, nothing. I figured maybe everyone had finally worked it out themselves. What I didn't know was that another conversation had already happened without me. Mom told me about it much later. Lauren had stopped by one afternoon while I was still at work. She found Mom sorting through the mail. The resort needs a deposit, Lauren said. Mom frowned. I don't really have that kind of money sitting in my checking account. Lauren leaned against the kitchen counter. What about your emergency card? Mom immediately shook her head. Your father wanted that saved for emergencies. Lauren laughed softly. This is just temporary. Megan will pay the balance anyway. Mom hesitated. I should probably ask her first. You know she'll say yes. Lauren smiled like the answer was obvious. She always helps. And honestly, if you ask her now, she'll just spend a week worrying about the budget. This way, everything's already booked. Mom looked down at her wallet. For several seconds, she didn't say anything. Then she slowly pulled out the card. According to Mom, Lauren reached over and squeezed her hand. See? It's going to be fine. That afternoon, the reservation was confirmed. The deposit went through. Everyone celebrated in the family group chat. And I had absolutely no idea that a decision had just been made, using my father's emergency plan and my name as the guarantee. The family group chat got busier every day. Lauren posted photos of hiking trails, then the resort restaurant, then spa packages, then horseback riding. Every few hours, another message popped up. We should all do the sunset tour. Who's bringing board games? This place has a hot tub overlooking the mountains. I scrolled through everything during my lunch break. Finally, I asked the question no one else seemed interested in asking. Has everyone figured out how we're splitting the total cost? A few people reacted with thumbs up emojis. Nobody answered. A few minutes later, Lauren changed the subject. Guys, look at these family photo spots. The conversation moved on without me. I stared at my phone for a second before putting it away. Maybe they just hadn't worked out the numbers yet. That seemed reasonable, except the same thing happened again. A few days later, someone mentioned adding a guided rafting trip. I asked whether that was included in the original price. Silence. Then another conversation started about matching reunion t-shirts. At first I thought I was imagining it. Eventually, even Owen noticed. One evening, he walked into the kitchen while I was making dinner. Mom, are we really going to the mountains with Grandma? I think so. You don't sound sure. I smiled. I'm just waiting for a few details. He nodded like that made perfect sense and went back to setting the table. I wished I felt as confident as I sounded. About 2 weeks before the reunion, Lauren invited everyone to her daughter's birthday party. The backyard was full of balloons, folding tables, and kids running through sprinklers. For a while, everything felt normal. Mom was helping hand out cake. My cousins were arguing over a cornhole game. The boys disappeared with their cousins almost as soon as we arrived. I actually relaxed. Lauren walked over while I was pouring myself another glass of lemonade. So, she said casually, I've been meaning to talk to you. Sure. She glanced toward the kids before lowering her voice. This year's reunion might be a little different. What do you mean? She shrugged. The resort isn't really set up like the old cabins. I waited. So, maybe it would actually be better if you skipped this one. I laughed because I honestly thought she was joking. What? The rooms filled up faster than we expected. I thought we already had enough space. Well, she looked away for a second. The kids kind of want their own thing this year. I frowned. Owen and Caleb get along with everyone. I know. It's just... She searched for another explanation. The vibe is different. I didn't even know what that meant. So you're saying there isn't room for me? I'm saying it might be easier. For who? Lauren didn't answer right away. Instead, she smiled that tight little smile people use when they're trying to end a conversation. Don't take it personally. It's just this year. Before I could respond, someone called her name from across the yard. She waved at me. We'll talk later. And just like that, she walked away. I stood there holding my lemonade, trying to decide whether I'd just been uninvited from my own family's tradition. The rest of the party felt different, not hostile, just awkward. People still talked to me. They asked about work. They asked how the boys were doing in school. But every conversation about the reunion seemed to stop the second I walked over. Maybe I was overthinking it. I honestly hoped I was. When the party started winding down, Mom asked if I could help her carry a few gifts inside. As she reached into her purse for her house keys, something caught my eye, a familiar blue credit card. For a split second, I thought I was mistaken. Then I saw the small label I'd personally added years earlier so it wouldn't get mixed up with her everyday cards. Emergency. I looked at it a second longer than I probably should have. Mom noticed. What? Oh, nothing. She smiled, found her keys, and closed her purse. I smiled back. But the whole drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about one question. Why was the emergency card suddenly in her wallet, when it had always stayed locked away at home? I couldn't stop thinking about that card. By the time I got home, the boys had gone straight upstairs to shower before bed, but I stayed in the kitchen with my phone sitting on the counter. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Maybe Mom had started carrying it after misplacing it once. Maybe I was making a bigger deal out of nothing. I wanted one of those explanations to be true. I opened my banking app. The emergency account was linked to my login because I'd been managing it ever since Dad passed away. I clicked on the credit card. For a second, everything looked normal. Then I scrolled. The first transaction caught my attention. Smoky Ridge Resort, deposit. I stared at the screen. No. I whispered it without even realizing. I tapped the transaction. The amount wasn't small. It was far more than anyone would ever charge for an emergency. I kept scrolling. Another charge? Room upgrade? Then another. Outdoor adventure package. Every single one had been charged to the emergency credit card. I checked the dates. They matched the same week Lauren had been flooding the family group chat with photos of the resort. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment. The money wasn't the first thing that hurt. What hurt was knowing exactly how those charges happened. Nobody had called. Nobody had asked. Nobody had even mentioned using the card. Someone had simply assumed I'd deal with it later. Dad's voice echoed in my head as clearly as if he were sitting across the table. Only for real emergencies. Hospital bills, a broken furnace, something that couldn't wait. Not a luxury resort, not upgraded rooms, not vacation activities. I looked back at the statement one more time, hoping I'd misunderstood something. I hadn't. There wasn't even an attempt to hide it. Everything was listed plainly. Part of me wanted to call Lauren immediately. Another part wanted to drive to Mom's house and ask her what had happened. Instead, I put my phone down. Anger has a funny way of convincing you that every problem needs an immediate answer. Dad used to say the opposite. If you're angry, sleep on it. You'll make better decisions tomorrow. I wasn't sleepy. I was disappointed. There's a difference. I made myself a cup of tea, even though I'd barely drink it. Then I sat at the kitchen table looking at my budget planner, the vacation fund, the boys' education savings, emergency savings. Every account had taken years to build, not because I earned an extraordinary salary, because I planned ahead. That's when another realization hit me. No one had asked whether I could afford to cover the rest of that resort. No one had asked if I even wanted to go anymore. They'd already decided the ending. Lauren would book it. Mom would use the emergency card. Eventually, Megan would take care of the bill. That wasn't an accident. That was an expectation. And somehow, without ever agreeing to it, I'd helped create it. I stayed at the table until well past midnight, not trying to figure out how to pay the balance, trying to figure out how to stop this from happening again. By the time I finally went upstairs, I already knew one thing. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to send angry text messages. And I definitely wasn't going to start a family fight over the phone. There was a much quieter way to handle it. The following morning, before driving to work, I made one phone call, then another. By the time I pulled into the parking lot outside my office, I'd made a decision that no one in my family knew was already in motion. The first phone call lasted less than 10 minutes. After verifying my identity, the bank representative asked, "Are you reporting the card as lost or compromised?" I took a breath before answering. It was used in a way it was never meant to be used. She didn't ask for an explanation. "We can deactivate the current card and issue a replacement immediately." "Please do." "Would you also like to block any future recurring charges connected to this account?" "Yes. Every one of them." Within minutes, the emergency card was gone. No yelling, no dramatic confrontation, no warning text to Lauren. Just a quiet decision. My next call was to update the automatic payments connected to Mom's account. Utilities, insurance, prescription reimbursements. Anything essential stayed protected, but it was all redirected to a different account that only I could manage. During my lunch break, I transferred the emergency fund into a brand new savings account, 5 years of carefully protecting that money. and one peaceful morning was enough to make sure no one could touch it again. When I looked at the confirmation screen, I expected to feel guilty. Instead, I felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't cleaning up someone else's choices. I was protecting the boundary Dad had trusted me to protect. I never called Lauren. I never confronted Mom. There was nothing left to argue about. The card had one purpose. That purpose had been ignored. So I fixed the problem instead of debating it. The rest of my workday felt strangely normal. A coworker looked over the front desk and smiled. "You seem less stressed today." I laughed. Maybe I finally crossed one thing off my list. She had no idea how true that was. That afternoon, I picked up Owen and Caleb from school. Owen climbed into the car talking non-stop about baseball tryouts. Caleb proudly held up a spelling test with one word circled in red. "I almost got a perfect score." "You'll get it next time," I said. His smile came back immediately. The whole ride home they argued about music, snacks, and whether we should order pizza. It was the kind of ordinary conversation I'd missed while constantly worrying about everyone else's problems. Halfway through dinner, Owen looked up. "Mom, are we still taking our trip before school starts?" I smiled. "I actually have a better idea." Both boys stopped eating. "What kind of idea?" Caleb asked. I grabbed my laptop from the counter. For almost a year, I'd been setting aside money in a vacation fund. Originally, I'd planned to spend it on the family reunion. Now I realized I didn't have to. The three of us searched for cabins together. Caleb wanted one with a canoe. Owen cared more about fishing than anything else. I wanted somewhere quiet. Eventually, we found a small cabin near Blue Ridge Lake. It wasn't luxurious. Just a dock, a fire pit, and a porch facing the water. It was exactly what we needed. The price fit comfortably inside my budget. For once, I wasn't spending money because someone expected me to. I was spending it on my own family. I clicked Book Now. The confirmation email arrived a few seconds later. Both boys jumped out of their chairs like we'd won a contest. For the next few days, they talked about almost nothing else. Owen packed his fishing gear 3 days early. Caleb kept asking how many marshmallows we were allowed to bring. I let him pack more than we could possibly eat. When we finally reached the lake, both boys were out of the car before I had finished unlocking the cabin. It was simple. The furniture had seen better days. The Wi-Fi barely worked. None of us cared. That evening, Caleb skipped rocks across the water while Owen tried casting his fishing line from the dock. I sat beside the fire, watching them laugh louder than they had in months. Nobody needed my wallet. Nobody expected me to rescue another bad decision. For the first time in years, I felt completely present. As marshmallows toasted over the fire and my phone sat untouched inside the cabin, another vacation was unfolding hundreds of miles away. At almost that exact moment, the resort attempted to process its final payment, using an emergency credit card that no longer existed. Caleb had declared himself the official marshmallow chef. According to him, nobody toasted them correctly except him. Owen rolled his eyes. "You burn every single one." "They're not burned," Caleb argued. "They're extra crispy." I couldn't help laughing. The two of them kept bickering while the fire crackled between us, and for the first time in what felt like forever, my mind wasn't full of bills, schedules, or somebody else's problems. I left my phone charging inside the cabin. If there was an emergency, I'd hear it eventually. Otherwise, the world could wait another hour. Several hundred miles away, the world wasn't waiting for Lauren. Around the same time we were roasting marshmallows, the resort attempted to process the remaining balance for the family reunion, just under $3,100. The transaction failed immediately. Card declined. Lauren tried again. Same result. She called the resort's front desk. "There has to be a mistake," she insisted. "The card worked for the deposit." The employee politely explained that the payment had been declined by the issuing bank, and they couldn't hold the reservation without a successful charge. "Can you give us a few hours?" "We can," the employee replied, "but the balance has to be paid before the deadline." Lauren hung up and immediately pulled out her own credit card. Declined. Not because the card was bad, because the available credit wasn't high enough. She tried another one. Still not enough. According to Mom, Lauren started pacing around the kitchen. Okay, we'll figure this out." She called one of her closest friends. No answer. She left a voicemail asking if she could borrow a few $1,000s, just for a couple of weeks. Then she called another friend. Same conversation, same answer. Nobody had that kind of money sitting around. Mom quietly asked, "Should we just cancel?" Lauren shook her head so fast she almost laughed. "No. The kids are excited. We've already told everyone." Mom looked worried. "I do have some savings." Lauren immediately turned toward her. "How much?" Mom mentioned the amount. It wasn't even close. "And besides," Mom added, "that's supposed to be there if something happens." Lauren let out a frustrated sigh. "We'll put it back." "You always say that," Mom replied softly. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Lauren picked up her phone again. She called her ex-husband. He listened long enough to understand what she was asking. "I'm sorry," he said. "I can't help you." "You don't understand," Lauren insisted. "If this reservation gets canceled, everyone will blame me." There was a pause. Then he answered with a sentence she clearly didn't want to hear. "No, Lauren. They'll blame the person who booked something nobody agreed to pay for." He ended the call. Lauren stared at the screen before tossing the phone onto the couch. "This isn't supposed to happen." Mom looked at her carefully. "What do you mean?" Lauren answered without thinking. "Megan always fixes things." The words hung in the room. Mom later admitted that was the moment she realized Lauren had never actually made a backup plan. She'd never saved enough. She'd never confirmed who would pay the remaining balance. She'd simply assumed that somehow, I would step in. Back at the lake, Owen finally caught a tiny bluegill and proudly held it up like he'd landed a trophy fish. Caleb insisted on taking pictures before they let it go. I smiled, completely unaware that my family was scrambling to save a vacation that had already started falling apart. When we finally walked back into the cabin, I picked up my phone from the kitchen counter. The screen lit up immediately. 3 missed calls. Then 5 more. Then another notification appeared before I could even unlock it. My phone started ringing again, and it didn't stop. My phone barely stopped vibrating long enough for me to unlock it. Missed call. Another missed call. Voicemail. Text message. Then another call before I'd even finished reading the first notification. The screen showed 31 missed calls. Most were from Lauren. A few were from Mom. Even 2 of my cousins had tried reaching me. I opened the messages instead of answering. "Call me now." "Where are you? Why would you do this?" "The reservation is about to be canceled." One message from Lauren simply read, "This is your fault." I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Normally, my heart would have started racing. Normally, I would have been trying to solve the problem before I even knew all the details. Instead, I set the phone down on the kitchen counter. Caleb walked in carrying another bag of marshmallows. "Mom? You coming?" I looked at him, smiled, and slipped the phone into a drawer. I wouldn't miss it. We spent the rest of the evening sitting around the fire. Owen proudly announced he'd caught more fish than anyone else at the lake. Caleb insisted that couldn't possibly be true because he'd only counted 4. They argued over it until we were all laughing. For a little while the phone didn't exist. Neither did the resort. Neither did Lauren's crisis. It wasn't that I didn't care about my family. I cared. I always would. But I'd finally realized something. Caring about people doesn't mean accepting responsibility for every decision they make. That was a lesson I'd spent years learning. The next morning, my phone had even more notifications. 18 voicemails, dozens of text messages. Several calls had come in after midnight. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I already knew what they would say. By the time our trip ended 2 days later, the messages had slowed down. Not because everyone had calmed down, because whatever had happened had already happened. The drive home was peaceful. The boys slept for most of it. I unpacked the car, started a load of laundry, and tried to settle back into normal life before work on Monday. Sunday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the front door, Lauren was standing on my porch. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked furious. "You finally decided to come home." I stepped outside and quietly pulled the front door mostly closed behind me. The boys were inside watching a movie. They didn't need to hear this. "What do you need, Lauren?" She folded her arms. "What do I need?" "I've been trying to reach you for 2 days." "I know. You ignored every single call." "I was on vacation with my kids." Her jaw tightened. "Our reservation was canceled." "I heard." "You heard?" She laughed in disbelief. "That's all you have to say?" I didn't answer. She took one step closer. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this has been?" "The entire family knows." The kids were devastated. We lost the deposit. People walking their dogs across the street started glancing toward us. I lowered my voice. "Lauren." She cut me off. "No. You don't get to act calm. You did this." I looked at her for a long moment. For years, I would have apologized just to end the argument. Even if I wasn't responsible. Even if I knew I was being treated unfairly. This time, something felt different. Not because I was angry, because I wasn't. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for refusing to rescue someone from a mess they created themselves. Lauren pointed toward me with a shaking hand. "I want one explanation. Tell me why you canceled that card." I met her eyes without raising my voice. Then I opened the front door a little wider. "Come inside. If we're finally going to have this conversation, we're going to have it honestly." Lauren walked past me without waiting for an invitation. She stopped in the living room and crossed her arms. "I hope you have a really good explanation." I glanced toward the hallway. The boys are in Owen's room watching a movie. "Let's keep our voices down." She gave a short laugh. "You think I'm worried about being quiet right now?" "I think your kids don't need to hear adults fighting." For a second, she looked away. Then the anger came right back. "The reservation was canceled." "I know. We lost the deposit." "I know. The entire family is blaming me." I nodded once. I figured they would. She stared at me like she couldn't believe how calm I was. "That's it? That's all you're going to say?" "What exactly do you want me to say, Lauren?" She stepped closer. "I want to know why you canceled Mom's emergency card without telling anyone." "I didn't cancel it because of the reunion. I canceled it because it stopped being an emergency card." Her eyebrows lifted. "Oh, come on. It was one vacation." "No," I answered quietly. "It wasn't. It was years of assuming you'd make decisions first and expect me to pay later." Her expression hardened. "I never asked you to pay for everything." I looked at her. "You didn't have to. You just kept telling everyone I would." For the first time, she didn't answer immediately. Instead, she shook her head. "You've always helped. So why stop now?" "Because this crossed a line." She let out a frustrated sigh. It wasn't hurting anyone. I couldn't help looking at her in disbelief. "You convinced Mom to use a card that Dad specifically set aside for medical emergencies. It paid for a resort. It paid for room upgrades. It paid for outdoor activities. None of that is an emergency. She threw her hands into the air. It was just the deposit. You would have covered the rest anyway. There it was. The sentence I'd been hearing in different forms for years. Not because anyone had asked, because everyone had assumed. I took a slow breath. That's exactly the problem. She frowned. What problem? You stopped seeing my help as a choice. You started treating it like an obligation. Silence settled between us. Lauren looked away first. Then she muttered, almost under her breath, I was trying to give the family something nice. I know. I really do. But you don't get to spend someone else's money to make yourself look generous. Her face turned red. You embarrassed all of us. I shook my head. No. I protected the money Dad trusted me to protect. You embarrassed yourself. She looked like I'd slapped her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she asked the question I think she'd been avoiding all along. So, you're really not going to pay anything? I met her eyes. No. She stared at me, waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. Finally, I said the words that had been sitting in my chest ever since I saw those charges on the account. Emergencies are for hospitals, not resorts. The room went completely quiet. Lauren blinked several times. Then she grabbed her purse off the chair. I can't believe you've become this selfish. I hope you're happy. She walked to the front door, yanked it open, and slammed it hard enough that the windows rattled. A few seconds later, I heard her car pull away. The house became quiet again. Too quiet. I sank into the couch and rubbed my face with both hands. I wasn't happy. Winning wasn't what this felt like. I kept thinking about Dad, about the promise I'd made beside his hospital bed. Somehow, that promise had slowly turned into carrying an entire family's expectations. The resort had never been the real problem. It was only the latest example of something much bigger. Everyone had become comfortable depending on me. And somewhere along the way, I'd helped create that pattern by never saying no. I sat there for a long time before opening my laptop. There was one conversation I couldn't avoid any longer. Not with Lauren, with Mom. I opened a blank email. The cursor blinked across the empty screen while I searched for the right first sentence. The email took me almost an hour to finish, not because it was long, because every sentence mattered. I told Mom that starting the following month, I wouldn't be sending the extra $350 anymore. The emergency card was permanently gone. There would be no shared access to savings, no automatic financial decisions made in my name. I also made one thing very clear. If you ever need help with your electric bill, your prescriptions, your insurance, or anything essential, call me. I'll pay the provider directly. I'll always help with real needs. I just won't send cash or leave accounts open for anyone else to use. I read the email 3 times before hitting send. Then I closed my laptop. For the first time in years, I didn't wonder if I'd done the right thing. A few days later, one of my cousins called. I guess you heard. I heard what? The reunion's officially canceled. Apparently, the resort couldn't hold the reservation any longer. The deadline passed. The deposit was non-refundable. Lauren argued with the manager for almost an hour. It didn't change anything. Several relatives complained that she should have picked the smaller cabins we'd always rented. Others quietly admitted they hadn't realized how expensive the resort actually was. Nobody mentioned me. At least, not to my face. Life slowly settled into its normal rhythm again. The boys went back to school. I went back to work. Every Friday, instead of transferring money into someone else's account, I moved a little more into Owen and Caleb's college fund. Watching those numbers grow felt strangely comforting. One Saturday morning, while cleaning out a hallway cabinet, I found an old envelope tucked inside a photo album. Dad's handwriting was impossible to mistake. It wasn't a formal letter. Just a few notes he'd written during one of his hospital stays. One sentence stopped me. The people who spend their lives saving everyone else often forget to save themselves. I sat there holding that piece of paper for a long time. He'd written those words years before any of this happened. Somehow, he already understood the burden I'd eventually carry. About a month later, Mom asked if we could have lunch together. Just the two of us. She looked nervous when she sat down. Older, somehow. "I've been thinking," she said quietly. "So have I." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "I should never have agreed to use that card." I didn't interrupt. "I knew your father trusted you with those accounts for a reason. I just didn't want to disappoint Lauren." "I know," I said. "She kept saying you wouldn't mind." Mom nodded slowly. I wanted to believe that. There wasn't much else to argue about. Neither of us raised our voices. Neither of us pretended the last few weeks hadn't changed anything. Before we left, I reached across the table. "I still want to help you. I always will. But it has to be different." She squeezed my hand. "I understand." And this time, I believed her. Lauren and I never really repaired our relationship. Family gatherings became polite instead of warm. We spoke when we had to. That was about it. Maybe time will soften things. Maybe it won't. I've stopped trying to control that outcome. The only part I can control is how I choose to live. These days, our vacations are smaller. Usually just me, Owen, Caleb, and a quiet cabin somewhere with a fishing dock. Nobody expects me to pay for anyone else's plans anymore. My budget feels healthier. So does my peace of mind. Looking back, the biggest loss wasn't a canceled resort reservation. It was realizing how easily love can become tangled up with obligation if you never set boundaries. The biggest win wasn't saying no. It was finally understanding that protecting the people who truly depend on me, my children and my mother in ways that are healthy, sometimes means refusing to rescue everyone else. If this story connected with you, I hope it reminds you that kindness and boundaries can exist at the same time. Helping the people you love should never require sacrificing your own stability or your family's future. If you've ever been in a situation where your generosity was taken for granted, I'd genuinely love to hear your story. Share it in the comments, let me know what you think about my decision. And if you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life family drama stories like this one. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.